So I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to this town hall for remote parents for Salem School District. I am Cynthia McMullen. I'm the parent representative who's going to be reading aloud the parent questions for Maura Palmer, who's Assistant Superintendent of Academics and Support, and Jenny Marshall, who is the former Director of Literacy and currently has come back to be the Remote Learning Coordinator. So they'll both give an introduction to get us started, and then I'll be reading the questions that we've received from parents.
Okay, thank you very much, Cindy. Hi, everybody. As Cindy said, I'm Maura Palmer, and thank you to those of you that are with us this evening, and also thank you to everybody that emailed some questions my way. I tried to group them together. There were several in common, so we grouped them in different categories. If there's something specific about your child, I'll reach out to you separately on that. We tried to keep it to some general questions about the remote structure and all of that. So thank you for that. And I'm happy to see some teachers on there too. So first I'd like to say that I too am a parent, and my son is living in the hybrid world right now in Londonderry. So while he's not completely remote, he's remote every other day. So I understand it's in a 16-year-old body, but I certainly understand how challenging it is on a daily basis to be working and to be supporting your students in their schoolwork, for sure. I just texted him prior to the start of this, making sure he was being productive right now at home. So I know what you're going through. So we're hopeful tonight, Jenny and I are hopeful that we can share some information with all of you, again, based on your questions and other things that we've been talking about related to the remote environment. As we are continuing to learn, we're continuing to reflect and trying to improve as we go based on what we learn. So, Jenny was not with us at the start of the school year. Jenny had actually retired last spring.
I tried.
She tried. She was our first choice though, when we said, okay, we really need someone to help out with the remote environment. So Jenny's come back to help us out with that, and she'll talk more about that in a minute. But on top of that, we work to get some support assistance into each of the grade levels. We did our best to get them in there as soon as we could, once the hiring process was done. And I'm happy to report there's one in place now for every grade level, and they're working out very well.
And a couple of them are here tonight, so welcome to you guys too.
Thank you for that too. Also, the special education assistants are in place. Title I teachers have been providing support, and those groups will happen more formally very soon, but they have been, some of you may have seen them if you've been on the Zooms at any point with your children. And our instructional coaches are sort of the behind the scenes heroes as well. Those are the reading specialists and the STEM integrators that work in the schools. So they meet with the classroom teachers, the remote teachers, every Friday for some planning for the week. There's a team that works with each of those teachers, and that's a good connection for the teachers with what's happening in the building as far as curriculum and instruction goes, and helping them to plan for the week. So
they jumped in and helped out with some proctoring for some of our remote assessments, and have really, they're squeezing their schedules as best they can and really trying to help out as well. Don't forget ESOL. I think Micheline,
that's right,
tonight. Micheline Ramey's our ESOL assistant, and Christine Nippert is our ESOL teacher who are primarily working with the remote students.
And ESOL stands for English Speakers of Other Languages.
Sorry,
so we have some ESOL students in the remote environment as well. So that's just kind of the overview of where we are at this moment. And hopefully as questions go on, we'll be able to provide more information for you. So I'll pass off to Jenny.
I am sort of jumped into this a tiny bit blind and a little bit late to the game, but having had the experience of participating in remote schooling last spring, and also participating in our reopening plans prior to my leaving on July 1st. I think I knew that I was going to come back to something that was going to be very different than what we had last spring. What we did last spring, we planned very quickly. I think I've heard from my friends and colleagues, I live in Dover, what they're doing. And I think we did a pretty good job with it last spring, but we also knew there were some limitations. And we tried really hard. I think the original planners of this, and then in the process of continuing to mold and shape what we're doing, we've tried really hard to use what we learned from last spring and make changes and focus a little more. And I will say, I know one thing that we've tried really hard to focus on is some of the smaller group work with students, just to try to meet their needs. Were we going to start with questions, or was I going to?
No, we're going to jump into questions. I just want to add something to what Jenny just said, that, the intent has been that small group instruction, as she just described. And we'll talk a little bit about whether or not the schedule will change at any point, based on instructional groups. But that's been our focus right along, is making sure the students are getting that instruction that they need in those groups. So anyway, with that said, Cindy, if you want to jump in and ask us some of those questions.
All right. So the first two questions we had were, what role does Dr. Marshall play as remote school coordinator? And can we expect communication from the school district directly to remote parents only?
Okay.
So because I'm retired, there's actually limits to how much I can work. And I am actually about 35% time, and working hard to use that time, initially primarily to support teachers who, I think we're also morphing and changing their instructional approaches for this. And so to that end, I started off with meeting and continue to meet with teachers twice a month. And I think part of it is to hear from them, to understand what concerns they have, what questions they have, what are some problems coming up that we need to try to tackle. And because I initially got some really good questions and some really good concerns, our meetings have often been me kind of trying to catch them up on all the things that we're trying to change and do. And one example, as you all probably know, parent-teacher conferences for in-school teachers are one day. We did extend the parent-teacher conference schedule for this group to 2 days, obviously, to be able to meet with all the parents. So that's sort of an example of some of the problem solving that we're trying to do. iReady testing, I sort of chuckled because I said yes to Maura on a Friday, and I think Brad St. Germain said, oh, and by the way, you got to handle all the iReady testing on a Tuesday. And it had to be done by the Friday, I think. So we jumped in and, tried to figure out, one, how to provide you all with the information that you needed. And I think we did communicate directly with you in that case. But the other really important way that we're communicating with you, and I think it's a high impact way, is really by communicating with the teachers and the teachers communicating with you. Having those web, either the LibGuides or the Google Classrooms, and being able to post and sort of create notifications on those. And I know many of those teachers actually email directly with you all. I think the meat of the remote information and the information related to what's happening in your classrooms is really coming from the classroom teachers. And so, as much as I would love to spend my Sundays in retirement writing you all letters, and I don't want to make light of the need for communication, but it's not something that I can take on in the first place. But in the second place, I think, and even more importantly, philosophically, you are all connected to your neighborhoods, and often our neighborhoods center around our neighborhood schools. And I think one thing we don't want to lose is that sense of community. We've had a number of students going back to their home schools, and continuing to have that connection with your homeschool and your homeschool principal, I think is really important. I mean, I think we all think that's really important. We're all dealing with the uncertainty of these times. And part of the uncertainty of these times is having sort of provisional behaviors. We don't set on the fact that we're fully remote for the rest of our lives, nor do we set on the fact that we're in school for the rest of our lives. But we do want to keep that connection to the homeschool because, you know, we will go back someday. And I think a lot of our students miss their buddies and their friends from the whole homeschool. So knowing what's going on and really being part of that community, I think is a really important thing.
Okay. I'll just add to that as well that so prior to the spring, the principals were not doing weekly newsletters per se. You know, they were sending out messages to parents periodically, but it became a weekly correspondence when we were remote in the spring, really based out of need to get information to parents as quickly as we could as things were ever changing. And so that practice has continued now into the fall, since we are in this situation where we have a group of students who are remote and a group of students that are in school. So, you know, I've been trying to provide, if there's information from my end, for example, this information about the town hall, making sure that that goes out to the principals so they can put it on their weekly letter. I will make sure that there is a section specifically for the remote parents. I will make, the principals have been very good about including it. But I'll ask that it stand out a little more so that there is a section specifically for any information that pertains to you. Yeah. Another point I'd like to make is that I think it's important to receive the communication from the school as well, because there, you know, at any point, if any student wants to participate in an event that's happening at school or, you know, a particular program, let's say, that's happening, that of course can happen. So, you know, again, we don't have a lot going on because of the situation right now, but if there were something, even I know one of the questions that came up that we'll talk about after would be band or chorus. If at any point any student wanted to come in to participate in that class, you're more than welcome to do that. So you would just need to reach out to the school principal to work out that schedule. But that's the kind of information that comes through that weekly newsletter as well.
And I think, Maura, you brought up this point, but we have gotten some feedback from people that it is a little bit challenging, you know, and in some cases, maybe a little bit depressing to read through all the things that are happening in the school and then get to the point where you hear what is the message for the remote family. So I think to that end, I think, you know, as Maura said, we'll try to work with the principals to have them sort of highlight that in some way or box it out so that if you want to sort of skim past all the other stuff and find that box just for remote parents, we can, you know, we can actually pull that out and try to get it highlighted separately in some way.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to try to keep going. Okay. So the next question is, who will substitute if a remote teacher has a sick day?
So we've been fortunate that there have not been, many, if at all, any sick days at this point. So the plan would be if the teacher is sick, is not able to teach that day, that there would be a message that goes out to the family and it would be posted assignments for the day. If it's a long-term illness, however, of course, we would bring in a substitute, but we wouldn't do that on a short-term basis if it's just for a day, because the students know how to access that information. Plus, we have the remote assistant now, the support assistant that can also help to get some information out to the parents. There just would likely be no synchronous lessons that day, no live.
I think we talked at our last meeting about this. You can see that we're constantly trying to keep each other updated because things do change. And now that we do have 6 assistants, and our assistants are some needed some training on the technology, some didn't. Those people would try to be available for office hours during the day and have their Zooms open so that if students were working independently and needed some help, there is an adult that would be available that day. You know, if
great.
If for some reason they were both out, obviously there wouldn't be, but that is part of the plan, is that we're going to try to have the classroom assistants make themselves available during the day.
Great, thank you. Our next couple of questions are about returning to school, from remote going back to school. So what will happen if to any remote student who decides to go back at the start of the next trimester, semester, and will help be available to get them back integrated into the school and following all the new procedures?
Mhm. So we've had some students transition back already.
Quite a few, actually.
Yes, and there have not been any issues of note. Of course, the school counselor plays a very large role in that transition. If the student has an IEP, it would be the case manager. But the teachers in the remote environment are following the instructional calendar of the teachers in school. We have that iReady data on students so that we are able to, get a sense of strengths and areas of challenge and that sort of thing. So the transition back should be seamless. It really should be.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as far as the social emotional well-being of the student, that's where the school counselor would help to make sure the student gets reacclimated into the school setting, learn the protocols that the other students have been practicing right along that are in place in school and all of that. And of course, the principal would play a role too.
I mean, as recently as last week, we've had students transitioning right back into school. So.
Right. And the process for transitioning before that between semesters, contact the principal?
It would be the principal directly, right? And so, we have to monitor the numbers, obviously, of the students that are in school. So it's not necessarily an automatic, it's a conversation with the principal if there's an interest to come back, taking a look at what the needs of the student are, taking a look at the numbers in that particular classroom. If we have a large amount of students transitioning in a particular grade level at the change of the trimester, we'll have to look across the board at the grade level. It's everybody's very attached to their neighborhood school. However, we do operate as a system, so again, the curriculum's the same. Mm-hmm. And you think about even in the remote environment right now, right? There's students from every school in each grade level. The teacher may not be from the home school. So, it's one of the benefits of how our system operates is that, we've had students transition from one school to another before. We have students in kindergarten who attend a different school than their home school and then transition back. So if that needs to happen, I'm not saying that everybody would need to go to a different school, but if the numbers got to a point that it was not safe enough to put that many students back into the classroom, then we'd have to take a look across the board and say, maybe we need a student to be reassigned to another school. But that would be a conversation with the parent, obviously, all of that before any decision is made.
Okay, thank you. Our next questions are about schedules. So will the daily schedule change at the start of the next trimester?
Yes, and that is a conversation that we've had a lot with the teachers, and with a real concern about being mindful of the needs at home. In a normal school setting and in-school setting, particularly with small groups, when teachers are working with small groups or a Title I teacher is working with small groups, those groups are changing all the time. Student learning is dynamic and it doesn't always happen at exactly the same speed. So a group of 3 students may progress at a slightly different level, or we may see something very specific in the needs of one student. And so often we regroup very fluidly. It's a very fluid, very continuous process in school. And we do that because we get data, we get iReady data, we get benchmark data, we have STMath data that we use to kind of see where is the student moving forward, where is there maybe a stumbling place that we want to focus for the student. And we just keep changing those groups. That's the ideal. That's what we want to do to continue student growth and to really focus on their specific needs. And that's one of the reasons that our whole class instruction is usually brief and clear, and then we get into small group work and individual student work with the teacher, and try to spend as much time as we can there. How to manage that in a remote setting is a real challenge, because we understand that there are working parents who have kids that are in school remotely, and that in some ways these schedules can feel very complicated. They are complicated. Another gold star for our teachers, they are amazingly professional and they get this done without, breaking a sweat. But when you see what that looks like for your student, and these times are changing and these groups are changing, obviously it's challenging for parents at home. So we've had lots of conversations, the teachers and I and our coaches and our curriculum directors, about how to maximize student learning with these groups, these dynamic groups, while at the same time being really mindful of the needs of families and parents, so that we're not giving you the sense that like everything's changing every 5 minutes. It does, because that's what learning looks like. Everything's changing every 5 minutes. However, we've worked really hard to think about how we can set these groups up and set up a schedule so that we would be able to give you, so for one thing, I think all the teachers have agreed that we just aren't going to be able to be quite as fluid as we normally are in the classroom. And that if we can set some specific times that there's going to be group changing, and give our families some advance notice, like, you know, anticipate a change at this time and this time and this time, that it might make things a little bit easier for you all at home, while at the same time allowing the teachers to be able to meet the needs of kids. So that's sort of our goal. We've sort of been in talks because the Title I teachers are just about ready to start groups with their students. And we wanted to be careful about special ed service providers and their groups, the Title I teachers and their groups, and then the classroom teachers and their groups. So I would say that you could anticipate a schedule change after parent-teacher conferences, and likely, you know, closer to Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving. And we will be actually setting some dates and posting those dates, so that you'll have some sense of when this is going to be happening. And then that will give the teachers a chance to be able to sort of look forward to, all right, this is the time I'm going to make my group changes and move kids around a little bit so I can meet their needs.
Okay. So, but the overall daily structure, like at the elementary level, and thank you for setting all the grades on more or less the same schedule throughout the day. That's helpful for making sure, like, okay, 9 o'clock, you both have to be here.
And I will tell you, you know, that is a huge concession to supporting parents. But what it does do, to be honest, and I think it's helpful to know this, is that it does pose some significant challenges for our service providers who are trying to push in and support kids during those content areas across multiple grade levels, and also for our Title I teachers who are looking for times to work with kids when they're not going to be pulling them out of classrooms. Right. So that's just a perfect example of those competing interests. And in that case, you know, we really said this is going to be important for parents, and so we're going to set it up this way and try to work around it. And that's what we're doing.
Okay. So expecting that kids that need additional small groups like Title I would have perhaps some more Zoom meetings, and not really expecting any reduction in like the reading, writing, math Zooms.
That's always been sort of a non-negotiable in school and in remote, is that every child should have access to the same curriculum, the core curriculum, and that what we provide is in addition to, it's a support of, as opposed to an alternative program. And so wherever and whenever we can do that, but you know, we're all kind of pushed into that same little set of hours, and you know, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty hard to do it. You know, we're really working on it, and I think there's some time in the middle of the day, that time that we call flex time when the UAs are made available, is one of the times that I think people are trying to use. And, you know, some of you may hear from, say, a Title I teacher who's willing to start working at 8 in the morning, or who might be willing to work a little later in the day, and and to ask whether you would be interested or that you would be available to have your student work with them at that time. So people are really bending over backwards to try to keep things smooth.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and kudos to the 2nd and 4th grade teachers for publishing the daily schedule or a weekly schedule with like, here's exactly where you need to be when, so that my kids can open it up and answer because I go in all the time, when's your next meeting? And they have a thing that they can reference and read, and they've gotten very good at logging into Zoom.
Yes, and just because I know we have more than 2nd grade and 4th grade teachers here, I will say I know they all have done a pretty good job getting those schedules up and the small group schedules up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, those are the only 2 I can speak to.
Yeah.
I knew that you had a 2nd and a 4th grader, so.
All right. So our next question is on the Great Minds website. For the math assessments for the young learners. Is that continuing? Can it be more user friendly?
Sure.
Are the kids really getting it?
Yeah. So that was a question that a parent had forwarded. The Great Minds website is connected to Eureka Math. It's called InSync, which we keep joking about the band InSync, but it's and it's complicated. There's no question. It's a digital platform that's being used for our remote learners. So, you know, we're continuously trying to come up with the best digital tools possible so that it can make it as efficient for everybody as possible while still maintaining our core curriculum as Jenny described. And we know it's just been launched. So it's a relatively new product for them as well, meaning the company. So we are continuously giving them feedback. So Brad St. Germain, his name was mentioned already by Jenny. He is our director of math and science. Mr. St. Germain works regularly with the teachers and the STEM integrators, and he is the one that would oversee the math curriculum. So he's been working hard to get this platform going from the company, specifically for the remote learners. We were finally able to launch it. So it's going to I know we were always asking for patience, but as we get this up and running, we'll work out the kinks and we'll provide as much feedback as we can to the company. So please, you know, parents out there, if there's something, I was glad this question came up because I gave him this information so he knew about the feedback. We're looking at another tool called Seesaw. More to come on that, but that will be a way for the younger students to be able to upload their work, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it's almost like, I would say almost like it's creating almost like a Google Classroom, but much more user friendly for grade K and 1. And there are Amy Chartrain is our technology integrator. She has prepared some really nice, I guess, information sessions or Google Slides that are available for both teachers. And I know our teachers have done some work with her already on this, but also for parents so they can see what that looks like. We don't have a specific date at the moment, and there's a few wrinkles we're still ironing out before we can launch using it, but we're getting close. And for parents in kindergarten and first grade, you'll hear more about this in the near future. And I wish I had a date, but I don't.
You know, I'm thinking as Jenny was talking to, you know, if anyone has a specific question, like for example, a math question, and it's something about the platform, you know, please feel free to email me. I can get the question to Mr. St. Germain. You could email Dr. Marshall if you wanted to. You could email Mr. St. Germain directly. You know, please don't hesitate to do that. And you'll likely, I don't want to say you'll get a quick answer from me, but you might get it sooner than the teachers who are not able to check all day long, obviously, because they're teaching, you know. So if it's something timely, please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help you with it, especially navigating this new platform. So that's specifically what our support folks are doing. You know, they're learning this platform so that they can help others manipulate it. So, and, you know, I think, you know, another thing we've learned, the companies themselves are doing their best to keep up with supporting the schools. For example, I know everybody remembers in the spring, the iReady seats that were made available. we didn't get people, we had kind of mixed reviews on that from parents on the use of the iReady seats in the spring, but that was something iReady made available to us as a school district when we had to go remote completely. So again, the curriculum companies that we work with are, creating products for us to help us, but that they don't come without some kinks.
Yes, and to add to that, I think, going back to scheduling too, scheduling and tools that we're using, predictability makes all of this much easier.
Yeah.
But we're also in a time of ever changing and improving systems. Zoom has added features that are really helpful. Google has added features to Google Classroom since, all of this remote schooling and COVID has gone on. And so we struggle with, do we want to add this? Do we want to take advantage of this and change things? What do we gain? What do we lose? So I hope people understand that when we do change things, it's not without a lot of deliberation and thought, because I think we are very mindful, or try to be very mindful of the need for predictability for everybody right now, and balance that with the need for getting the best tools and practices that we can into the hands of our teachers so they can do what they're trying to do.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what efforts are being made to supply age-appropriate learning materials to students, like lined paper, math manipulatives, etc.?
So it was interesting when I saw that question come through, because I was bothered by the fact that someone didn't have the materials they needed. So, that's one of those things. Please just ask. So just reach out to the building, the home school. Again, feel free to email one of us. But if you email the home school, even the admin assistant, the secretary at the school, and let them know, I need some math lined paper or whatever it is, we will make sure you get that. Okay.
But,
so
a couple
whatever
of our
you need
have said, I know Carrie Feibler, Mrs. Feibler, our kindergarten teacher, is interested in putting together some packets to go home for students. And so we're sort of, as we juggle New Hampshire State Assessment and parent-teacher conferences, we're looking toward that as the next project that we're going to set up. And I do know also that there's been some questions about the math resources. I think students got through Module 3, and at some point we're going to be needing to provide some additional materials. And again, that communication likely will come through your classroom teacher as we get those systems set up. And most likely the process is going to be that the materials will be at your home school, and there will be some system for picking them up in the lobby, or having sort of a curbside restaurant like pickup of your takeout educational materials. So there are a few things in the works, and you will be hearing from your classroom teachers on that at some point. But do plan that the process will be to go to your home school and get those materials, and they'll probably be in a packet with your student's name on it.
And in the meantime, just ask. Please just ask.
Thank you. All right, switching gears. So this one's about testing and data from the testing. So how is the data from iReady and the NHSAS used by the teachers?
So I'll jump in first, Jenny, if you don't mind, and I'll just describe it, and then you can talk about how the data is used. But I want to explain why it has felt a little test loaded at the start of the school year. So we do iReady as a school district every year, 3 times a year. We do it in the fall, we do it in the winter, we do it in the spring, up through grade 9. And that is data for us in the school district to use for teachers. It's instantaneous, the results. The teachers are able to analyze the results and use it for instruction. So we didn't have any iReady data from the spring when we were in remote. So we had, the last data point we had on the students was from January of last year. So it was important to administer iReady just to get a read on where students, again, where they were coming off of the remote experience in the spring. And we went back and forth on whether or not to administer it to the remote students, knowing it was going to be challenging because we needed the parents to do that. But we felt like it was important to get that data on the students. when I say data, it's again, it's areas of strength, areas where they need additional support. Teachers use this data all the time in school. So with that said, we decided to go for it. And I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for helping to make that happen. I can't believe the success rate we had in completion. Never in my wildest dreams. It was above 90%, right, Jenny?
Yeah.
So, and that was straight through at the middle school as well. So thank you for that. But on top of it, New Hampshire SAS is normally administered in the spring. New Hampshire SAS stands for New Hampshire School Assessment System. And it's usually a spring assessment. But again, because the students didn't complete it in the spring, the state required us to administer it to all students this fall. So we didn't have a choice on that one. Unfortunately, it was kind of close to iReady. iReady is the data that we really use as a district on a daily basis. New Hampshire SAS is a requirement and gives us data to use as well. But it just, because it was mandated this fall, it just came really closely together. So that's why it played out the way that it did.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the teachers were able to manage that test and we didn't have to have the parents do it. But I know you were all probably there helping get them on and everything, but okay.
And I would say, you know, kudos to the teachers who did the testing. We did bring in our coaches to help proctor those. It was a very new experience for everybody. And even though we all did the training that was provided by the state, it was still really hard to figure out, you know, in the way that we like to be prepared for what was going to happen. The good news is, in many ways, this was a dress rehearsal for our remote group for how the quote unquote real testing, or the testing that's going to count as a more high stakes test, will happen in the spring. So I think we also have learned a whole bunch from administering that assessment. And you know, any test that's given once a year only gives you data on that student once a year. And those are often state requirements. It helps you see from year to year where are our curriculum strengths. You know, are we doing a great job with geometry now when we weren't before? But it doesn't necessarily help you see day-to-day or short-term student growth. That's what iReady does for us. iReady allows us to look at student performance in multiple sort of domains in math. So we can look at geometry, numbers and operations. I'm going to forget them all. Algebra and algebraic thinking. So it breaks it down so that we can actually drill in a little bit and see where is the student really seeming to get it, and where are their strengths, and is there a little gap area or a prerequisite skill that we might want to fill in. And the same in literacy, which I can name from heart. But you know, 5 domains, the reading foundational skills, 3 of those, and then vocabulary, literary, and informational comprehension. So teachers, as they're getting ready to teach, say, an informational unit, might look at that data and say, what does my class look like? You know, how are they in terms of understanding how to make sense of informational text? Do they read captions? Do they understand how to tackle new vocabulary? And if the students are really good at something, they can sort of move ahead of it. And if the students have an area that the teacher needs to kind of slow down and stretch out, they may do that too. So doing that 3 times a year helps, because going back to our discussion about groups, learning is really dynamic. You know, it's changing all the time. Learning is about change. And if change isn't happening, we're probably not doing our jobs, right? So, so that data and doing it 3 times a year is really helpful for us in math and literacy in particular.
When I'm thinking, we just had a student transition back from remote to one of our elementary schools. And the day after that student started, right away, the teacher was looking for that student's iReady data back in school. Like, that's how important it is, you know, to just get a read on, okay, just so I know where this student's coming in, what level he or she is at, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's really important for us to have it. I know it was a little bit of a pain in the neck to administer, but I appreciate it.
And it is a good denominator across schools, right? So that's what Salem does so well, is sort of has this common language across schools, common curriculum, and a common way of sort of looking at what a student's strengths and needs are. So that's pretty helpful. Teachers do a really good job observing those strengths and needs as well. and in the remote setting, again, that's where the small group instruction is key. For them to be able to be with 3, 4, 5 students and have some conversations about text or work on some problems in math, they really see where each of those students is in terms of the grade level expectations. And whether they're in a class of 15, 25, or 35, that's still in school or out of school a much more difficult way to observe students. So again, small group work is really where it's at in both in school and in a remote setting.
Okay. And how soon do you get the data back from those tests? Are you able to use it right away?
Yep, right away, instantaneous. Yeah,
Snap.
which is great. Yeah, it's all within the system, and teachers can look it up as soon as the students complete the assessment.
Yeah, and even with the New Hampshire State Assessment now, you can get some
Right.
preliminary data very quickly. It's not, it hasn't been made official right away, but we can look at it and sort of try to learn from it right away.
Great. And I know we did reading assessments, like a one-on-one reading
The
assessment.
benchmark assessments, yeah.
Yeah. Do those kind of follow the same?
They're similar. It's a little deeper dive, because the teacher can observe the student real-time reading. So iReady, the student reads, and the process of reading isn't made visible to the teacher, but the answers to the questions are. In the case of the benchmark, the actual problem-solving skills of the student, how do they word it, how do they attack a word, how fluent are they, do they use punctuation when they read, does the meaning change because they're reading too fast or too slow? Teachers observe all of that, and that isn't available on a computer-based test. So they get a real deep dive into the student's process of reading from those assessments, and that really does provide them with an opportunity to go in and sort of tweak the process and fine-tune the process.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on. Maura, you touched on this a little bit. Will the school district be providing chorus band for remote students?
Right. So unfortunately, we're not able to offer that right now simply because of the availability of our teachers who are trained in those areas. But as I said earlier, if you would like your child to come in and participate in any of those, please just read. That includes strings. We have a couple of, actually, I think there's about 5 or 6 of our remote students who are participating in strings. So that's a come on in for that period of time. So just call the homeschool and that can be worked out. If at some point we do have a teacher that's available to teach those particular classes, we certainly will offer it.
Okay, thank you. Any advice for parents going into parent-teacher conferences next week?
So first of all, hopefully everybody has gotten information on parent conferences. The remote teachers will be offering them over 2 days, just again, so that they're able to give time to the parents that would like to sit and chat via Zoom. My advice always for parent conferences is just to go in prepared in that, be sure you get to ask your questions. You don't want to just receive all the info. If there's something you're concerned about, please don't hesitate to mention it in the conference. If the teacher can't answer it for you right then and there, they'll get back to you. We have a really strong team of teachers teaching remotely. So I'm sure you'll be given some great information on your own child, but please don't hesitate to ask questions on your end as well. And if you're not able to make it in those days, just reach out to the teacher as well to arrange a different time.
I would say, and I know, I think you all do have open communication with the teachers, but if you do have a more general question, like the ones that are being asked tonight, I would encourage you to email me or Maura about those kinds of questions so that you really save that time, and it's not endless amount of time to talk about your child. And so I would say, if you have some specific questions about how we're doing remote schooling or any of those kinds of things, please do save them and email me or Maura or even your homeschool principal. But yeah, because it would be lovely to have a long time, but I think with the Zoom meetings and everyone's doing Zoom meetings, you want to make sure that you can use that time to really learn about your child's strengths and needs and the ways your teacher's working with the student.
All right, thank you. We're getting down to the end of the questions, and we're hoping to wrap up by 7, so we're doing great on time.
Yeah.
So when does the semester, trimester, when does it end, and what will the report cards look the same for the remote learners as they do for in-school learners?
The trimester ends on December 4th, and report cards will be mailed to you all December 11th. So there's a period of time between the trimester ending and report cards get issued for the teachers to prepare whatever they need to. The report card will be the same report card that the in-school learners receive. It's the same grade level standards they will be scored against. The only thing that there's no unified arts scores anyway, even for the in-school learners in the first trimester. So that's not a difference for the remote learners. There won't be any information on science and social studies. However, if anybody can picture the report card right now, there's detailed learning expectations, we call them, in literacy and in math. For science and social studies, it simply understands concepts in science and math on the report card. And just because the focus for the remote learners has been literacy and math, that science and social studies part will be left blank for now. We're hoping to integrate some specific science as we continue on through the year. Again, we're trying to still be mindful of scheduling, not blowing it up too much for parents on the home front. But, we've talked about potentially creating some modules in science that parents and students can access on their own time, that sort of thing, for some extra. So that's in the works.
Great.
Anything else about the report card, Jenny, that you want to add?
I don't think so. Teachers are, I'm going to sound like I'm harping on something here, but I think teachers are gathering the evidence that they, it's not always a paper and pencil assessment that they use to determine whether students are meeting those grade level expectations. And a lot of it is those interactions and observations. So that benchmark assessment is so many things. It is an assessment. It's also a teaching opportunity. It's also a social and emotional support because the student has the teacher to themselves. And it's a time when the teacher is really gathering evidence about what the student can and can't do. And I think the same thing is true, again, emphasizing more of those small group meetings that they have with their teachers. That's where they're able to see what the student, which expectations the student's meeting in math or meeting in literacy. So they may not have a whole pile of tests to show you or talk to you about, but what they will have is sort of observational evidence together with some of this other data that we've collected to be able to let you know where your student is in relation to those grade level expectations.
And the beauty of the parent conference is, the parent conference used to be right when we gave out the report card, going back a few years. That was when we had quarters. We moved to trimesters when we moved to a standards-based report card, what you see now. And we kept the parent conference. The first year our schedule was it didn't jive, and we kept it the way it was. But we got such positive feedback from the teachers and the parents on having the parent conference separate from the time of the report card. It's earlier, get your feedback. The report card should just be reinforcing what you're hearing at the parent conference.
Okay. So that is the end of the questions that were submitted from the other parents. Maura, do you want to talk about school lunch?
Sure. And before we move on to that, I also want to say, if there was, as I said, if there was something that you submitted that was a little more specific, maybe about your particular child, I will email you directly. And if you feel like there was something that was asked that I didn't capture, again, as I said, I tried to kind of group questions together. So please feel free to email me and I'll respond to you if there was something that didn't get covered that you were hoping we would cover. So lunches, Jenny, well, maybe we can share the page if we want to, but
Yeah.
on the website, all students are able to receive free lunch this year. That's in school as well as remote. So we were just going to show you where on the website you can access it. If you go onto the home page,
Here we go.
and then so Jenny started on the home page and then clicked on the parents tab, parents students tab, and then scroll down to food service on the left.
Oh, but you know where I got it? Sorry.
I think if you go home and remote, and then you can go to the.
Yeah, from there. Yeah. It's probably easier just
Funny, we found it.
let you explore it yourself.
It moved up.
We wanted to show you where you can access the application for the lunches. While Jenny's bringing that up, the lunches are offered. There's 2 different times to order throughout the week, Monday and Tuesday. I guess on the right there, Jenny, you could do.
Oh, right here. Yeah.
That's not quite it. That's the free and reduced.
Monday and Tuesday are when the first round goes out, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's breakfast and lunch. And you can just communicate with the homeschool if interested. Michael Willett is our food service director, and so he would be a contact for you. What if you just Googled SAU?
Yeah, that's how I did it last time. So this is what I did. If you want to do this, is SAU57.org. Food service was my Google, and that took me right to it. And this gives you the information about applying for food service. And here is general information, all the school menus. And we have heard from a few families that the schedule for pickups is not 100% convenient. So remembering that the lunches are available to anyone. I believe this is where you order your lunch for the week.
Not.
That's the free and reduced lunch application, Jenny.
Oh, sorry.
Can I walk you through finding it?
Yeah, you could probably do it. Sorry.
So if you go back to the main district page.
Waiting to go there. Okay.
Yep. And then that visual thing that says remote learning, learn more with a stack of windows.
Mm-hmm.
Then the last tab is food service.
Here we go. All right. Mondays and Thursdays. And Deb Payne has let me know and wanted to make sure that I conveyed to our families that if the pickup times that are made available are not convenient, and I know they conflict in some cases with, times that students are working or meeting with a teacher, there is some flexibility there. And I know there's a few people, I think, Cindy, you said you've actually been able to pick up your meals when at other times, right?
Yep, I go a little earlier or a little later than the window because both of my kids have small groups at that time.
Okay. So there is some flexibility. If you need to set up something very specific, I would contact Michael Ouellette, who's our food service coordinator, to get that set up.
Yep. Okay, and please take advantage of that. There's it's a great service that's available for you. It can take another stressor out of your day. Then you don't have to think about making meals for your kids.
Yeah.
So,
and then they can either complain about or be joyful about the food with their friends who are in school eating the same thing. And I just wanted to say one more thing, that wasn't specifically a question, but I have had at least one teacher talk to me a little bit about noticing some of the students really missing their friends at school. And, we've all talked, I think she contacted Mrs. Palmer about connecting with the wellness committee and thinking about how we can build some support around those social connections that our students really need. And one of her suggestions was to see if we could find a way to work with the in-school teachers to set up maybe a little before school time for students to Zoom between remote and in school. And now that we do have our assistants who have some planning time and their day starts earlier, we're looking into setting up something to sort of try to rebuild that bridge between the students that are in school and the students that are working at home remotely. So more to come on that too. You know, we're building the ship as we're sailing it in some ways, but I think we're staying afloat, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. You're all doing a pretty good job.
I agree. I think Salem's done a fantastic job rolling this out. And thank you for giving us, as parents that want to be remote, thank you for giving us this option.
You're very
And
welcome.
I know that it's not a great option for a lot of people, especially if you can't be home during your school hours. So thank you for also giving the in-school option.
Okay, and likewise, thank you, Cindy, for offering to, or accepting our ask to run this evening. And I'm hopeful that some good information was provided for parents. Again, I encourage anybody to email if you have a question that didn't get answered. And if this is something that people are interested in us running again, we can do it again, even after the second trimester gets rolling. So, and I was gonna say you could also email Cindy, but we didn't really talk about that. I don't know if you want to get emails from anybody, but if you have any feedback for her, please let us know.
Yeah, send them through Mrs. Palmer, and she can redirect.
Pass them on.
Yeah, very good. Okay.
Well, I hope everybody has a good night and you stay nice and warm, because it still feels like it's pretty chilly out there.
Well, it'll be 70 this weekend, maybe.
I'm ready. A
That's
little
right.
bit of raking, a little bit of yard cleanup, and then we'll be ready for winter.
Right.
Boy, look at that. It's 6:58. That was perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you so
Have a
much.
good night.
Good night.